The assignment destructuring in ES6 allows us to bind properties to variables, and we can do that with objects, arrays, and functions. So first things first, let's look at an example how we would do this the old way. So let's have it as a variable of person. The person is going to be the object, so we're going to assign the curly braces, and over here you can see that I misspelled it. So it's not going to be like this, it's going to be const. And then over here within the object, we're going to write name. Now the name is going to be John, and we're going to have it last name. Now the last name property is going to be Anderson. And the last thing is going to be the age property, which is going to be the 25. Now if I would want to assign one of the property values to a variable, I would need to do something like this. So we have a const of name is going to be equal to a object, which would be person dot name, and the same thing if, let's say, I would want to access the last name. So over here we're going to write last name. However, you can notice that it's going to get tedious if we're going to get a bunch of objects. So every time I'm going to have to create a new variable and then assign to a object dot and the property value. So with a destructuring, we can write this much simpler. So let me first comment out the const name and last name. So let me grab both of these and let's just comment this out. Now after that, let's write a const, which is going to stand for keyword for the variables that we're creating. Then since we would want to destructure the object, we're going to use the curly braces, and you'll see why this matters, because as we're going to be working with arrays, we're going to have to use a square brackets. And here I'm going to write the variables names that I would want to access. So let's say in this case, I would want to access name and age. And here I would just have to set it equal to what object I would want to destructure. So if I'm going to do a console log, then the name and the age should return a John of 25. And again, the great thing about this is that I can destructure as many properties from the object as I want. So let's say not only name and age, and this is also going to be the last name. Now, if we would want to see, obviously we would need to console log the last name too. So I can access whatever properties I would want. However, keep in mind that the property names need to match. Otherwise, this is not going to make sense if you're trying to access something, but the property is not there. However, we can have it as a alias, and let me show you what it means. So let's say in this case, we were going to change it around. It's not going to be the name. We're just going to say that this is going to be the first name. So if you would want to use a different name for it, we just need to write that different name after the colon. So we would want to access the name property. However, we would want to name it as a first name. Then the age, let's say that this is going to be something like old. So let's just name it as old. And for the last name, let's just delete it. And if I'm going to go back and if I'm going to access the first name and the old properties, I should have the same thing where I have the John and 25. So first, let's access a first name, which is going to be the first. And the second one is going to be old. So once I console log it, sure enough, I still have John and 25. So this is how we can use it as a alias. So here, let's write alias. And next, let's look at how we can work with arrays. Now for the arrays, like I said, we would need to use a square brackets. So let's write arrays over here. And then let's say first that this is going to be the array const of distance. And let's imagine that we live somewhere where we have three distances. So first one is going to be 100, and second one is going to be 50, whether it's miles or kilometers, or the third one is going to be 200. Now, if I know that first one, let's say, would be home, second one is going to be store, and the third one is going to be work, I can just do const. And like I said, we just need to use the square brackets. Then JavaScript knows we're talking about destructuring the array, not an object. And we're going to write store. Then the third one is going to be the work. And here I'm just going to set it equal to an array. So here I just write distance. And again, if we're going to do a console log, we should have for the home, for the store, and for the work, the values of 100, 50, and 200. And the destructuring works really nice whenever we want to work with a flipping the values. So let's say that I have two variables. Now the first one is going to be num1 and the second one is going to be num2. So let num1 is going to be, let's say 5, and the number 2 is going to be, I don't know, -10. So num2 is going to be -10. Now previously, if we would want to flip these values around, I would need to create a third variable. Now before we do this, let's just console log or comment out the console log, both of the console logs, so our console is clean. And then let's look at how we would do it the old way. So first we would say the third variable. Now this is going to hold one of the variables. So let's say in this case, this is going to be equal to num1. Then we would want to set the num1 equal to a num2. And then third, we're going to set the num2 equal to num3. So this is how we're going to flip the variables around. So if I'm going to do a console log of num1 and num2, now they should be other way around. So the num1 should be -10 and the num2 is going to be 5. So once we save it, sure enough, for the num1 we have -10 and here we have 5. Now, like I said, with a destructuring, it is much more straightforward and much more easier to understand. So let me comment out the num3 and let's work with the same values and see how we can flip this around with a destructuring. Now here, I don't need to declare the variables again. So I can just write num1, then comma, num2, and I just set it equal to an array. However, in the array, I'm going to write what variables I would want. So in my case, I'm just going to write that I would want the num1 or num2, whatever we would want to do. And over here, we can just say num1. So in this case, we're just grabbing whatever value and we're flipping them around. Now it's the same thing if I would write over here a num2 and num1, and then obviously these ones would have to be our other way around. So let's do again console log num1, num2, and we still have -10 and 5, even though originally the num1 is going to be the 5 and num2 is going to be -10. So you can see how easy it is to flip the values around. And also, whenever we're working with an arrays, we have an option of skipping a value. So let's do a items. So const items. Now within items, we're going to have a few items. So the first one is going to be the orange, second one is going to be the pants, and the third one is going to be the candy. So let's say that we would want to access only the orange and the candy, and we would want to leave out the pants. And we would want to assign this to fruit variable and to a sweets variable. So let's create again the same variables. However, we're going to use the destructuring. And here we're going to write that first we would want to create a fruit variable, and the second one is going to be the sweets. However, you notice that we have the pants. So here what we were going to do is we're going to skip the pants since we don't want to assign this to a variable, and we're just going to set it equal to items. And if we're going to go back and if we're going to do console log and we're going to look at a fruit and switch, we should have the orange and the candy. So this is how we can skip the value in the array that we wouldn't need. We're just going to leave this one empty. Now also we can do a default parameters. So let's say that we have the items, and the items in our case is not going to have the candy. But whenever we are setting up the structuring, we don't know whether it has the candy or not. So in our case, we can just say that if it does not have the candy, we can do that the sweets is just going to be equal to candy. So in our case, again, once we run it, we're going to have the orange and the candy, even though the candy is not in the items array. Now after that, let's look at how we can work with a functions and how we can work with a parameters of functions with a destructuring. And you're going to be using this a lot once you start working with a React and once you start working with the props in React. So first let's write function parameters, and then within a function parameters, let's say function, say name. So this is going to be the name of the function. Now this function is going to accept a object as a parameter. So in our case, we're going to say that we are looking for an object. However, we don't need to write specifically what we're looking for. So the old way would be once we have an object. So let's say, or here we're accepting a person object. Now this would be obviously just a parameter, but once we have the console log, we're going to say person, and then we need to look for the property that we're looking for. So since we already have the person object, let's look for the name and the age. So here I would need to write person name and person age over here. So once I have the function, then I'm gonna call the function or invoke the function, and here I'm gonna pass my object, which would be again the same way person. So here I'm gonna write person. So I have a John and the age is 25. However, with a destructuring, it's gonna be much more straightforward, since I can just write a curly braces, and then I'm gonna say what I'm looking for from the object. So in this case, I'm just gonna say name and last name. So those are the two properties that I'm looking for. Now, obviously, those two properties, if you want to access them, at least whatever you want to access should be on the object. It's not again going to make sense if you're accessing the property that's not there. So in our case, we can just rewrite this. We can just say that we're looking for the name and we're looking for the last name. So we just write it like this. And sure enough, we have the John and the Anderson. So everything is working. And in this case, however, we're accessing the properties with a destructuring. So we don't need to rewrite the same object name everywhere we're accessing. We just choose whatever properties we would want to select from the object, and then we just pass them over here. And like I said, in React, you'll be passing them as props a lot, and you're going to use the destructuring a lot in React. Now the last one, let's look at how we can destructure the return from the function. So let's write another function. Now this function is going to be function. Now here we're going to say get person, the name of the function, then parentheses, and then we're just going to return. Now we're going to return a few things. First, we're going to return the object, so we're going to have curly braces. Then name, we're going to say name1 because we already have used the name and I don't want to comment it out. So the name is going to be the Bob. Then let's do last name again. Let's do 1, and over here in this case, this is going to be Jordan. So he's going to be Bob Jordan. And last one is going to be age 1 over here. And again, we're going to set it equal to, let's say, 47. So I have a function that returns an object. And I can do the same way how I'm working with a parameters. I can also work with the return. So in our case, let's create another destructuring. So name, and name is going to be 1. So this is going to be my variable that I'm creating. And the second one is going to be age. And I'm going to set it equal to a function instead of the object. So I can use a get person function. And let's check it out what I have in the console log. So once we console log it, now if we're going to console log name 1 and age 1, we should be getting back a Bob of 47. So once we save it, sure enough, we have a Bob of 47. So this is how we can work with assignment destructuring in the ES6.